Hello, this is the last tutorial for DrawScatter, DrawArray and DrawMesh now for this series and for the time being, which is the update of the version 2 of DrawArray and DrawScatter. I wanted to show you and explain a bit how DrawMesh works and what's the philosophy behind it. It's a simple tool. It basically allows you to just sketch with curves and then have it meshed with a simple geometry. Like this is just a cube. You can also have rounded shape like that, and it will adapt to your drawing, and a ribbon, which is very useful. For example, if you want to map textures that have alpha, or do you want to add a special effect like a distortion or refraction or things like this. You can taper the ends of your brush. I like to treat this as a brush because it's mainly a tool to sketch, so that's why I called it like that. You can change the size, and at any point, if you go on edit mode, or while you're drawing actually, and you select some of the edges, you can with Alt S, oops, as I always forget. So in edit mode, if you press Alt S, you can change the scale, or you can change it by changing the radius here. So you don't have to select the whole edge, you can select just one. And you can also twist it, so you have full control over the edges, the curves that you're drawing, and then how the asset looks. I put an option to change the shape, so you can basically flatten it. So like this, you can either have a brush that's a bit more flat, same for the round one. The ribbon, of course, doesn't affect because it's already flat. So really trying to treat it as a brush the way Photoshop would behave, because after, depending on what textures you put on it, if you put alphas, you can really start feeling like you're painting around. There's an option to have straight line. Basically, we'll use only the first and the last points of your curve to draw the mesh, which is useful in certain cases, and then the face camera I'll show you just. I have a couple of examples and features that I want to showcase. So I created a modifier that I call perturb to go with this. If I if I hide it, you can see that I just have my cubes like this, really basic and standard and quite digital. So I thought it would be nice to be able to break a bit the look of it and make it look a bit more organic and break the edges less 3D. And you can change the strength of it, and you can change the scale of the noise. So low scale will perturb only on some instances, and then high scale which will give very high frequency thing. And then you can change the seed, which basically moves the noise around. So this one is really cool. That's pretty useful if you want to give a bit of a more 2D look and more painted look to your objects. You have the possibility to use custom meshes. You just need to choose the option here and then pick your custom mesh. I have a bunch of assets over there, and it will just draw the mesh the way it is. So it will stretch it compared to DrawArray, for example, which will instance the object on the curve and try to fit as much as it can. This one is going to stretch the object. So that's why it's really great to sketch environments, because you treat this mesh as a brush, and for example, you can snap it on the ground, and now you can just start sketching a bit where you want these types of details. So you can either really easily give flavor to an environment by sketching like that. And you can offset the mesh just if you want to seek it in a bit more, for example, just keeping the raw details in this case. If I come and just select, let's say this one, the bigger works, you can do the same, and you can either see the ground connection, or you can just have it being better integrated. And so you can snap it to the ground. It works exactly the same as DrawScatter and DrawArray, or you can even just simply put your drawing mode into surface. So you can just draw your asset as much as you want. And the longer your brush strokes, the more deformed they will be. It's just to keep in mind. Oops, I'm just to be careful how I'm drawing. So if I do this, I'm just gonna make something very distorted, but it can be fun looking like this. Depending on the type of look and the type of assets that you have. You have an option to delete the geometry that's outside of the plane, or you can just keep it, but for now I need to find a way to have it not do this. So you can or not taper the edges, brush size, Here, just to show a bit of the straight line, it's very good for this type of objects, for example, that you can then just come and draw around. Keep in mind, if you do this with heavy assets, because they are distorted, they are released instances, so they are a bit more heavy than using instances. So something to keep in mind, depending on the type of computer that you have. So I put some random rotations, and with the snapping, it should work the same way as a DrawScatter, where if you input, for example, 45 degrees on an axis, it's gonna go 45 or 0 or 90 degrees, like with increments of 45. If you put 90, it's gonna rotate it 90 degrees every time. So here it's doing the rotation, the shift, because the pivot point is at the bottom. If I put it at the middle, also change the axis. So like this, you can see that there is a rotation of 90 degrees and over the x-axis, because this one is oriented on the x. I see here that I have an orientation. If I clear the rotation, I need to fix the axis. So it's facing on y-axis. So now if I want to put the 90 degrees, it needs to be on the y too. If I put 180, it's gonna alternate between front and back. And then if you go above 180, it's gonna have a random rotation. It's deforming it when you rotate it because it's trying to match the curve. And I have DrawArray and offset UV. So it works, of course, when you have tile-level textures. When you have something that fits precise UVs like this, it's not gonna work nicely. Here it is for all of the features mostly. And then here, straight line works really well for this type of offset, but you can also have them just bend. Here it was just to show that you can have a collection, and then you can alternate the seed of your objects. Same, they are put on a straight line, but just because they are pillars. So this one is to show the feature of the face camera. So I'm using ribbons in that case, but it works with any other assets. And if I move the camera, you can see the objects are following. So if I'm in the perspective of the camera, they will all face it, which is great if you have some sort of proxies or textures, I don't know, that you've drawn and that you always want to be facing the camera. So they will face as much as they can. And this works really well if, for example, let's say, just put my camera around here. So I have the ribbon, and because these primitives, I am building them directly from scratch in geometry node, and this object is a curve. I cannot embed the material like I'm doing on other tools. For example, draw terrain, where you can have a material here, and I can pick it up, so you don't need this, but here, unfortunately, you need to input the texture that you want to use if you use these primitives. If you use the custom mesh, of course, it's gonna use its textures. I just want to show a cool trick. So, using a refraction BSDF on a plane, you can distort what's being seen behind. And something I'm building actually for Texture Blender is a node that adds a sort of mixer brush or smudge brush to Blender with that type of feature. So I can just show quickly sort of version, like a way simpler version. So if I redraw this with a way bigger brush size, you can see here how I'm distorting what's happening behind. And then if you have the right sort of texture and the right fading on the edges, just to show you guys how you could achieve this very fast. So you could add a gradient texture, because all of them have UVs that are generated, so you can use textures on them and they will be correctly mapped. So if I have this, for example, and then I mix the two of them by multiplying, and then I can have transparent shader that mix with this, and now I can have the edges fading. And if I draw something, it's gonna be a bit more integrated. And so you can see with and without. So that's one of the use case. You can also definitely just have this as a texture and then just start painting your texture on something that you have. Like you can make stylized grass and just paint it around. I just like this effect, and I think it has a lot of potential to give a cool 2D look to, or less digital look to a scene. But initially I wanted to show this example to show you this, which is just a mesh that I sculpted quickly like this, that resembles briefly a rock. And then I just started painting on surface, sketching the asset itself. And I really like using it like that because this is perfect to block out an environment or even a sculpt, because you can just block your shapes in like this and it's gonna create a bit of abstraction, a bit of noise, and you can always scale up and down. What I did here for the smaller one, I duplicated it and reduced the brush size. So like this you can draw smaller assets or smaller design, and then you can always scale it if you want by pressing Alt-D. So this is really cool to just sketch environments and even just sketch anything around, and it will use the sort of shape language that you created with the sculpt that you did initially. If I was to have a second one, for example, if I duplicate this one, I go in sculpt mode, and I was using the new lasso trim in 4.2, works really well. They really improved it a lot, so it's way faster than before. If you want to have an accurate representation of what you're cutting, you need to go in orthographic mode, otherwise it's just going to be funky. But yeah, let's say I'm cutting this one around. And then if I add these two to a collection, and instead of referencing that object that's named cube, I can reference the rocks, and now it's gonna alternate between the two. And if I switch, I can see which one is being instanced randomly. And here is just an example, combining some of the other ones, plus sketching around some assets like this to very quickly set dress a scene. And this takes really 30 seconds to draw around these assets. And at any point, you can always grab one of them, one of the curves, and then you can even scale. I'm really trying to make it fun to set dress and create blockings and populate a scene with DrawScatter, DrawArray, and DrawMesh, because with all of these three in combination, you can have really fun stuff. So that's it for this one. It was faster than the other demos that I did, and I hope you have fun with this sculpting tool and sketching tool. It's intent to be used as a sort of brush to sketch around environments. Bye!